Hello, welcome to the May 5th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you've not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, it's always helpful if you could indicate which version of Cubase or your Steinberg program that you're running. So if it's Cubase, LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, what version number, so if it's 13, 14, 15, and which operating system, that information is often helpful. Realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be impossible with the number of questions coming in. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your questions, just know that we will get through all the questions, and if we could avoid repeating the same questions, that would be appreciated. When we should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience for the live streams. So we'll give a special shout out to Jazz Dude and to Agent K. We'll also give an extra round of appreciation for Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So that site is a wonderful resource of information, of different tutorials, articles, video links, downloads, presets that are really beneficial for the Steinberg community. So it's a great site. Go ahead and check that out if you haven't been there. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today. I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so first question we had from Baba Sa. Hi, Greg, Cubase Pro 15 on Mac Sequoia. Is there a way to increase the jog speed of the transport? I know I can hold down shift to make it faster, but can you actually change the default speed? So I don't think that there's a way to change the default speed. So if we come over here, if you're triggering it with keyboard shortcuts, so a lot of times if you're doing kind of like a jog wheel, so let's say if I'm over this particular, I'll put, so if we wanted to, so I'm not sure if you want to just kind of, so I have a jog wheel on my controller that I can navigate, but if it's, I'm not sure if it's for, so on the jog speed of the transport. So I'm not sure if it's tied into scrubbing. So like if we come here and say, okay, we want to scrub. We could have kind of, if it's like where you hear the audio playback in time, we think if we go over here and we go under transport, you will see shuttle play, and here you could assign, half time, 1/4 time, 1/8, 1x, 2x, 4x, 8x. So, you could set up key commands for these particular, if you're kind of scrubbing, or if you wanted to shuttle play, but I don't think that there's a way to change the default jog speed that I know of, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, the UK. We have Klaus joining from Malmo, Sweden. Thanks for joining. All right, we see Jan from CubaseIndex.com. We have Tim K joining from Zeist, and his cat buddy is waving a paw. Hello to my cat Steven, Stella, and other pets that are nearby. And he's ready to learn. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude on, maintaining his perfect attendance. Appreciate you. All right, so we see Stefan joining from Sweden. Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. All right, so we have Soren from Sweden, Benny also from Sweden. All right, so we see a question from Lebelofest. Says, hi, please help. If I play a MIDI part, how can I change the project tempo without altering the MIDI part? When I change the project tempo, I lose the tempo and timing of the MIDI part. Thanks. Okay, so let's say our project tempo here is 100 beats a minute. So just go ahead and mute this guitar part. So let's come over and say I just want to play. Okay, so let's say I want to, we'll put our click on here. Okay. So let's say I record something on a click. All right, so let's say I want to quantize that to quarter notes. So I'll just come right over here. So now we have quarter notes at 100 beats a minute. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this track here, and there's two different types of timing modes for a particular track. So tracks can be in musical mode, where if we change the tempo, the MIDI and audio can automatically follow its position based on the measure and beat. But if we want to keep something at the exact same time, I'm going to put this into linear mode. So let me come over here and let's adjust our metronome or click to 132 beats a minute. So now we hear the click. So now this track is playing at its original tempo. If I put this track into from linear mode to musical mode again. So now when we come over here, so just take that particular track and put it into linear mode. So you see the little clock there. And then as we adjust your tempo, so let's say we come back over here, we go back to 100 beats a minute. If I put this track into musical mode and change the tempo here to, we say 132, now it's going to follow 132 beats a minute. So just try taking that track, and you could also, choose to lock the events. Let's say if I come here and I go to 100 beats a minute, so we go back. We could also, lock the position of, so if I want to lock this particular event, let's say if I change my tempo to 132 again. So the event will be locked, but just try coming over here and choosing to switch to linear mode from musical mode. Then that should take care of it for you. And then the track will play at its original time position for you. All right, it's wonderful to see John Barry checking in from the sunny English Riviera in South Devon, England. All right. So Tim Weinheimer says, how do I replace a song? Same song, just an updated file on how to move audio files in the montage in Wavelab 13 Pro on Windows 11. All right. All right, so let's go open up Wavelab. All right, so I'll just open up quick. Okay, so let's say I'm in a montage here. Okay, so let's say we have so let me just, all right, so if you want to, move a file within, okay, so let's say if I want to replace this particular file, so I'm just going to come over here, let's choose this particular file, and I'll just cut, and I want to put an updated file, so I'll just kind of right click and we'll say insert audio files. We can come over here, we'll browse. So let's come over. Let's see if I have. All right, so let's come over here. So, okay, I want to. And so we're going to put it into our montage folder. We'll add mix, and we could just place that directly kind of at our position. So let's say I want to truncate this down here. Okay, so now I have a new file. If you need to adjust the length of the montage, you can now just come over here. If we kind of select all of the events here, if it's a different length, we can move the events in the montage to accommodate if there's a different length in the file. So again, I could just select all of these kind of as a group and then move them together and place them into the montage. So again, you could just kind of right click, cut, copy, paste, or delete a particular file from your montage. And all right, and the second part of the question is how to move audio files within the montage. So if I just come here, we can just, select one particular file within the montage. If we are just doing, let's say, just a bit of a change here, let's say on our length of a particular file, one of the other things we could do is just kind of come right over here with the montage, and we can choose to just move your particular files like so. So let me know if so, just like we're kind of grabbing the ending here, if we want to do real-time crossfades, but you should just be able to select one of the audio files within a montage just to move it around individually. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Tim. All right, so we have Adam Langford saying hello to everyone. We see Sable Winters on. We see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. Sable's from Bay Area, California. Thanks for joining. You see Rick Valentine Music says, by the way, thank you Yamaha for upgrading the video output options. My clients also thank you. So it's probably more to deal with Steinberg, but if you're not familiar with this, one of the things that we had before is we could replace the audio in an existing file. We could also replace an audio file that would create a kind of often a large file when we go to export video files. And new in 15.02, just when we get to export video, just come over here. There's now different resolution options. So at that point, you could choose different resolutions. So you could still have kind of a high quality video output at a much smaller size. So my friend Danny Lux, who's kind of a well-known TV composer, he was like ecstatic when he saw that feature. So it was very helpful to be able to output a high-quality video file at different file sizes so that they're easier to share with people doing approvals and stuff like that. But great to see you on, Rick. And Rick is a noted composer from Charlotte, North Carolina area. Gareth says we need a montage, that everybody needs a montage. It's a good term. I think Wavelab kind of utilized it early on. So I think came in Wavelab version 3, probably 97, 98. Now it's a Yamaha instrument now, so as well. All right. All right, so we see Palmel's 2. Says, hi Greg, using Cubase 15 Pro, try to edit some vocals by pressing Z on my keyboard, but no movements. I also press Shift and Command to detect specific area, but no movements as well. All right, so usually pressing Z on your keyboard, so unless you've kind of mapped out the so usually Z will kind of do like a full zoom for that particular keyboard, but if we wanted to undo the zoom, we could do that. So usually Z does that. Now, if you wanted to select like specific ranges, what we could do is just come here. So let's say if we have our vocal file here, so if you wanted, so let's say if we grab our range tool, I think it's, by default, if you hold down Control plus Shift with the range tool, then you could just select different ranges like so. So if you needed to just come over and adjust one particular word, you could just come here and then go up to the top and bring that volume down for that section directly there. But you don't get that with the selection tool. You get to have kind of the range tool. And if you have the combined modes, hold down Control or Command plus Shift, and that modifier key can be changed. So when I come over here, we'll go to Preferences from the Edit menu on Windows or Settings menu under the Cubase menu and go to your tool modifiers. And I think with the, if we go to the range tool, so we select a range tool, we could see that you can adjust the different settings here. Also, when you get to the select tool, we can now, you can see that's going to be Command plus shift generally. So, but you could modify that. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, is with the range tool to be able to just kind of easily select a segment and then say, okay, I just want to bring that volume up or down accordingly. It's a great feature. All right, so we have Jack Bauer checking in from New York City. All right. Okay, Tim Weinheimer is just asking, is there a way to lock the song audio file in the montage? I had an audio file. Somehow I altered the file in the montage in Wavelab 13. All right, let's open up Wavelab again quickly here. Okay, so let's say if we come here, okay, so if we want to lock a particular event, let me just see if there's any. Just adjust my preferences here quickly. Okay, so if we go to the clip here, looks like you should be able to time lock a clip. So now I can move this clip. This one is time locked and I can't move it. So try to select the clip here, like the song, go to the clip menu from the audio montage and you'll see a lock, and you can do a full lock or just do a position or time lock directly there. So let me know if that is kind of what you want to do for your workflow. So again, if I adjust this position and we say let's do a time lock, I can't move this in time, but I can move this clip. This one is time locked as well. Can't move those. So you could do a full lock or just a time lock. So probably a full lock. Let's say if I come here, let's do this clip and say, I'll take this off. So let's say if I'm on just a time lock, I probably can't move it in time, but I could probably still do fade ins and fade outs. But let's say if I do a full lock, I don't think that I can do any fade in and fade out. So we could choose to lock the position or lock all aspects of that particular clip right there. All right, so we see Pommels 2 just says, thanks, Greg. We see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma. All right, so we have Sable Winters. Brian saying hi to Sable Winters. And we see Uno Memento on. All right. Uno Memento wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, Pommels 2 asks, hi Greg, what days of the week are you on? So generally do every Tuesday and Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So that would be like starting 26 minutes ago. So it's generally Tuesdays and Fridays. Just a quick programming note, like May 15th, I have to do a Dorco training for a school system. So I won't be able to do the live stream on the 15th. I'll give reminders of that, but generally it's going to be Tuesdays and Fridays. All right, so you see from Tim Weinheimer says, great, that's exactly what I wanted to do with the locks and Wavelab montage. Thanks again, so you're welcome. All right, so we see from Chris Hall, says other Steinberg products could benefit from the Cubase plugin set, but this is not reciprocated. It says Cubase owners could benefit from plugins and other Steinberg products, i.e. headphone match in Nuendo, saturator module in Wavelab, Yamaha, is it Vocaloid voice changer. So Vocaloid doesn't come with any of the Steinberg products, but you could have it for, there's the OmniVocal, which comes directly with Cubase. Nuendo will always have some more plugins that are sold in addition to Cubase. So, every plugin that's in Nuendo, whether it's the post filter, Nuendo specific, headphone match being one of them, there will be some distinctions. I will mention that, headphone match would be, the Cubase users are kind of seeking it out, but many Cubase users don't need a Doppler, a Doppler effect. But if you're doing post-production, it could be like a really essential tool. Stuff like the randomizer could be like more specific workflows for post-production and game audio production. So some of those don't migrate down to Cubase, and so some will be kind of unique. And we often see some of the mastering tools that go into Wavelab because it's a mastering-oriented solution, even though you could run many of the similar functions inside of Cubase. So there will be some distinctions of different levels. Like, Cubase Elements doesn't have all the Cubase Elements could benefit from every plugin that's in Cubase Pro, but as you update or upgrade to bigger versions, you get more plugin capabilities with it. All right, so we see Robert Higgins checking in from, saying hi to myself and Jazz Dude from Morro Bay in California. Thanks for joining. Beautiful area. All right. All right, so let's get to a question that was mailed in. So it says, the Steinberg support line just got closed down in Australia. What am I meant to do now if I need immediate help or an issue that's not documented? So there have been some distribution changes with some of, it's probably, I don't know for sure, but it's probably maybe Yamaha Australia shut down the support line. So it could be that you would just go to and fill out a support request form. So you may have to utilize kind of the global system for that. So if we come over, we could just say, all right, so let's say if you go to the Steinberg Help Center, you can submit a request here. This would often be it could go directly to the, because when we have distributors in different regions or different countries, part of the distribution agreement to be able to sell Steinberg is that you would have local support agents. I know in the United States, we still have our support team that are currently employed by Yamaha, but there could be some changes. So you may not have a person in Australia to call. You could submit a support request form. Well, there's people in multiple time zones. I don't know the exact time zone coverage for Australia, but so you probably would have to go through and just submit a typical request form, and that way you'll deal directly with Steinberg directly, and probably get great help that way for your support. All right. All right, so we see from Alex, hi Greg from Mojave, Arizona. What's your trick to converting an Apple recording of an M4A to Wave AIF file that Cubase 15 Pro can recognize? So I think even if you do it in Apple Music, or there's a number of like utilities to convert an M4A file to a Wave or to an MP3, and those file formats are kind of universally recognized in all DAWs. So I would look for so if it's like a recording from an iPhone or something like that, sometimes it needs to be kind of converted, because oftentimes there could be variable kind of bit depths and variable bit rates and a lot of variables to make the file size smaller. So there's probably, and I'm not sure if you're on Windows or Mac OS, and then there's different utilities for that. I think even Apple Music does it if you're on Mac. And probably, so we could just, and we'll just, so here's a number of different, MP3 converters and stuff like that. So. All right, so we see from Soren, just says maybe Steinberg rely on product feature suggestions from surveys. I don't see a problem with keeping an eye on competition and making feature your way for them. Yeah, I mean, they obviously read through all the forums, and they read through all the, they're pretty avid readers of Cubase Index as well, and seeing what people are doing, but they also rely on surveys, because that's a very kind of concrete way, a very quantifiable way of for new feature suggestions to prioritize them. All right, so we see from Alex, just says, how's your experience testing Cantai in Cubase 15 Pro? So currently, when I went to open up Cantai on Cubase, it would say this host isn't supported yet, so it's only going to be, I think, MuseScore, Sibelius, and Dorco support was just added. So maybe they're working on kind of an overall VST3 version, but currently you'll get the message from Cantai that it is not supported inside of Cubase as a VST3 plugin. So I'm sure that they're probably working on it, but currently in its current form, it does not work as a traditional VST3 plugin in DAWs. All right, Robert Higgins just says, my Cubase Pro 15 is version 15.020. What is the current version? How do I update to new version? if my version is outdated. All right, so the latest one with 15.02 came a bunch of new features, and there was a maintenance update to that, a 15.0.21. So if we go to, and you could always come over to your Steinberg download assistant. So just get this opened. And then often you would just see, once you come here, you could, once you're logged in, you'll probably see something that says updates up the top here. But you could also just come right over here and say, okay, I want to go to Cubase Pro 15. And I come over, and here you can see that you could download the latest version here. So what you could do is just click on install, and then you could have the 15.0.21 automatically installed right there. So you can do that, and I think that you're kind of notified when there's updates in the hub. So let's say if we open up the hub here, so if we go to the hub settings, I think you could choose to show web content. But sometimes you'll see the notifications come in here. It may not come in if I actually have the 15.021 update. But check that out. But always you could go to, again, the Steinberg download assistant, and you'll see kind of updates listed at the top area. So just kind of look again here. Or if you don't see that, sometimes, you just go to your Cubase Pro 15 here and see, make sure you have the latest version right there. Okay, let's get to another question that was mailed in. Let me just get my document here. How to sync audio loops in MIDI to a song with varying tempo. Okay. So we'll just do a new project here. Sorry, let me just import file. All right, so many times if we're dealing with recordings of live musicians and we notice that maybe their particular tempos were a bit fluctuating from, because it's a live band and maybe they recorded to a click, but it's not perfectly to a click in the eyes of the computer. So let's say if we have so you can see that there's no correlation between a click track and what's going on with the music. All right, so if I put in a drum loop, the drum loop's going to follow the click track. So there used to be kind of this dilemma of like trying to make the band play so rigidly to a click that the track and song would often kind of lose a natural kind of ebb and flow, kind of like a breathing in and out of different tempo changes. So people would often try to have the band perform like the computer so that people could add different elements to it. And that's fine, but sometimes you may want the different elements to fit the live performance. So let's say if we want that scenario, I'm going to take this track here. I'm going to select the event. Let's come over to our project menu, and we'll go to our tempo track and select tempo detection. Click analyze. And now you can see that we have our tempo track that's automatically been calculated. Now, as it stops, you could listen to it, and some people say, oh, it's not accurate because it's changing all the time. And if you have a groove where, let's say, the backbeats are a little behind the beat, those in essence are subtle tempo changes. So if you have a groove, you may have tempo changes going on even if it sounds perfectly steady. Often it's not. So when it puts you into this mode, it actually puts you into like a time warp, and you could listen to the track, and if needed, you could move the bar lines to kind of match the existing track. So most of the time it does a great job. So let's say we now have our tempo track here. All right, so let's say now when it did this, it's basically figuring out what the beat is, and we don't want to assume that all music is in 4/4. So it could be in 3/4, it could be in 6/8. So, but it's going to basically figure out from the beat what's going on. So it's placed a time signature track. I'm going to take this from 1/4 to 4/4. All right, so now we'll listen to it, and so let's say we want a drum loop to automatically follow along, or MIDI information. So we'll come over to my media tab, and let's just look for some drum loops. So let's find something that's completely different. Okay, so now I'm going to drag this in, and because I had this little music note turned on, that automatically dragged the track in musical mode. So this activated musical mode for us automatically just because we previewed the loop with this turned on. So let's put this here. I'm going to make some copies of this drum loop. And now this loop is automated since it is in musical mode, so we could audition in the same project tempo when it's in musical mode. So that when we drag it in, musical mode's automatically turned on. So if we just wanted to bring in this loop, so all the subtle tempo changes are now being carried over directly to and now this loop is following the live performance, the tempo and feel of the live performance. So that way, again, select the particular loop and come right over here, go to your project menu to do a tempo detection. Once that's been done, you could tweak it utilizing, because it places you into the warp grid mode, and you could make adjustments. And then when you're browsing your loops, click here on the little music note, and this way you could audition the loops in the native tempo of the project. So if I turn that off, we listen to the loops, hear how much faster they are. But with this enabled, when we click, it will automatically audition at the project tempo for us, so you get an idea what it sounds like. Then when you drag that loop in, that loop is placed into musical mode once this is turned on. And if we do MIDI, our MIDI would still follow these same tempo guidelines and automatically follow the tempo of an audio track that has varying tempo in it. All right, go back to some live questions. All right. All right, we see from Robert Higgins, says, Greg, you're a genius, thank you. So, not that smart. So, all right, from RKO7409, can we save and quickly load drum machine pattern and sounds together just like we do in Groove Agent? Yes, let's go take a look. Okay, so let's come over here to, let's say we have a drum machine part here. Okay, so let's say right now we go to my drum machine. I don't really have, let's, all right, so I think if we come over, let's say we go to media, and then let's say if we go to presets, track presets, and drum, let's see if we drag this over.
Parking.
All right, let me just. All right, let's see if this carries over. Let's say get to the editor for our drum machine. All right, so let's see. All right, so let's say if we come over, let's say if it's the pattern here, let me just go back. So say to presets, pattern, and then the pattern editor here. Let me see if this. So let's say, let me just come over back to drum machine. Okay, and I'm gonna make, let's see if we can save a, if I come over, just create a quick pattern here. Let me just try. New project here. Sorry, it has something else playing there. Okay, so let's add a drum track here. Okay, so let me come over here to presets. All right. So if we do this, this is just going to be our presets for the drums. So just our sounds. So let me come over and let's get to our patterns. So let's say I want to come over to beats. All right, so let's come over here and we just remove all these. All right, so let's say I want to come to rocket fuel. So if I come over here, that is automatically including the drum machine with its pattern editor. So once you come over to patterns, you can go to the pattern editor and say, okay, I just want different beats. All right, so let's say if I modify this pattern, so I'll come over here to editor. Let's see if we could save it. So let me just, I'll just do a drum track and let's see. We'll make it a pattern event here. So let's say all right, so let's come over here. Let's save this as our track preset. right, so let me just come over to my user presets here. So you can open it. Let me just see if, come over here to, but if you come over, and I could play around with it, it's more for Friday's live stream. But again, if you just come over to presets, to patterns, to the pattern editor, let me just see if I go to user presets, to the patterns. So let me just say if I create this again, so let's say, all right, and let's see if we save this as a preset. If that recalls the instrument. Yeah, so if you, within the pattern editor here, just save it as a preset and that will recall the drum. So you could recall the drums and the edits by themselves, or if we go to the editor here, click on Save Preset in the pattern editor, and that will automatically recall the particular drum set as well. So yes, you can simply work around that. And okay, so we see, is there a smart way to split, and this from Jack Seed, is there a smart way to split an audio signal? I have a bass line I want to add a phaser effect to, which will cause sub issues. So I'd like to leave 0 to 120 hertz clean mono while adding effects to the rest. Okay, so let's say, okay, so let's come over here to like synth bass part. Okay, so say we want to, I think if we come over, let's go to, all right, so it's a phaser effects. I'm going to add a phaser, I'm going to add an effects channel. All right, and we'll put a phaser on, I'll make this. Okay, so let's say now. All right, so right now we have the phaser on all of the frequencies, and I'll just make it a little more obvious here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is on this effects channel for the phaser, I'm going to open up that channel, and I'm going to put, it seems like a weird choice, but just an imager plugin on. Okay, and the imager, let's say we want this band to go from okay. So let's say you want 120 hertz. So basically what I'm going to do is to take off 120 hertz. So if we come over here, let's just, so if we take out those particular frequencies, and you could also do this with just an EQ before. So let's say if you want to use the imager or just the channel EQ here. So let's say, okay, I want on my pre section, let's do kind of a high cut filter, let's say. All right, and I want that to go to 120 hertz, or 120 hertz, yeah. And let's do just a quick, say 48 dB cut off. So now as this track is going through, I'll just move the channel strip before, so we could just place an EQ before or just move the channel strip. That way all of those frequencies will get cut off. So you can put just an EQ beforehand, so even if you wanted to utilize the frequency EQ, so let's come over here, we'll take a different approach. So we can say, okay, let's just put that EQ before that particular frequency, and say we want band 1 just to be 96 dB cut, let's say up to 120 hertz. So if we were to kind of move that, so if we wanted to have, so you hear that the flanger, the phaser is only going to be cut off. So if we do it for all frequencies, but you can just put the EQ before the phaser plugin. And adjust that. So basically you're EQing those frequencies out before the signal hits the phaser effect. So let me know if that makes sense for you. So a couple ways to approach that. Okay, so we see from USA Roman, the new pattern event when opening a new track, but it loaded empty. I have no clue how to get a kit up and running. Also a bit confused with this and Groove Agent as a plugin. All right, so if we were kind of doing like, the difference between like the drum machine and Groove Agent. All right, so I'll revert this. So we wanted something that was going to be just very fast and easy. So let's say if we go to our different drum events here, all right, so we have Groove Agent, and Groove Agent has 2 different modes. So we have this as kind of like a virtual, a virtual drummer, kind of like, real acoustic drums. So that's kind of one mode of a lot of drum machines working. And another mode that a lot of drum machines work at is kind of more of like a sampling MPC paradigm, like a sampling drum machine. I think, was it SP1200, MPC, obviously. So, if you're going to be doing acoustic stuff, then, you have both options within Groove Agent. So it's kind of a dual attack. So acoustic drums and electronic drums. Now the drum machine can do acoustic drums, but it's really kind of well suited. And we wanted it where someone could just kind of click on, okay, I want a drum track. They don't have to search for plugins. They don't necessarily have to search for sounds. So let's come over and I'll just add a new drum track, and we see that this will be blank. Now what the drum machine adds is going to be different drum synthesis. So we have 128 pads to use. Let's say, okay, I'm looking for a kick drum. And I want this kick drum on this pad, so I could double click. And now I got a kick. Okay, now all of my parameters are just kind of laid out for me. Okay, I want to tune the kick. Okay, do I want to add a click for an attack or not? Do I want to adjust my decay time? Let's adjust our pitch. So let's say, okay, I like that. Now let's go snare hunting. So this combines synthesis functions. So I can say, okay, let's do a snare. So I'll just say, okay, and let's go to a hi-hat. So we'll select a hi-hat. All right. And for Beverly, we will put in a cowbell as percussion. So we'll come over, and now we have, and again, we could adjust these different parameters. Let's say, okay, I wanted to put let's say on my snare, I wanted to put reverb. I don't want to look for a reverb plugin. I just want to come over here, and when we select our snare pad, I can now just come over here, and I have reverb. It's very simple. I don't have to go hunting for a reverb plugin. If I go to my hi-hat and I want to put a delay on it, I could just come over again. So it helps when you select the hi-hat, and then now if I wanted to edit the delay, I could click on the delay button. I could say, okay, let's sync our delay. Let's edit the reverb. Or if I go back to my instrument. So now I have some sounds loaded up. All right, so now if I want to program a beat, I just click on the editor tab, and I can see all of my sounds come over here, and we could now program. So let's say we'll come to our hi-hat here. We'll say, okay, let's do every third. With our delay, then we'll randomly put in some cowbells. And now I wanted to perhaps, shift the cowbells over. So this way I could just kind of very easily make drums without having to open up a plugin. Now if I wanted, more capability where it's like, okay, now, I got my basic beat and what I want to do, or I need more flexibility with sound design, I could come directly over to, let's say, our beat agent kit. And, when I come over here, here I'm going to have the ability of, running it through filters. So if we turn on filters, like say when I come over here to, my kick drum, and let's go to our filters, we'll say we want a classic filter, and now we could do let's do our envelope amount here. Or let's say I want to do pitch. So we could adjust kind of multi-stage pitch points. And have more control. This will also have kind of like a similar, so we could have our kits and our patterns here. If we wanted to program patterns, just like we do with the pattern editor, we could do that here. So think of the drum machine as being just like, okay, I don't want to worry about all the details. I just want to get a beat programmed quickly. The drum machine is perfect for that. And if you're doing hip hop, electronic, EDM, dance music, it's perfect. Now, would I try to, sequence like a John Bonham part that was like so authentic for trying to convince people that it's a real drummer? You could do it, but Groove Agent with its tools will be a better choice for that. But we wanted just a very easy, approachable way to work with the drum machine and to start making beats, because so many people work with that. Okay. All right, so we have sounds by Timo. Just says Sheboygan sends their regards. Sable Winters says don't forget to hit the like button. All right, 54 Beatmaker just says anyway to auto assign all pads to outputs in order, pad 1 out 1, pad 2 out 2, etc., because doing it manually kills the creative flow. So I'm not sure if it's in if you're talking in Groove Agent or if you're talking inside of the drum machine. So let's take a look. So if we come over here to the kit, I think it might be manually. So let's come over here. Let's get to the main output. Let me just try holding. I think I'll just try another. Try with agent buses and see. Let me just look in the options and see if there's a keyboard shortcut that's listed. Yeah, I don't see. I'll just try a different modifier here, just out of curiosity. The one thing you can do if you have it set up once, so let's say if we have it set up once, let's say we're going like outputs 3 and 4, etc. One of the things you can do is just come over here and you could lock the outputs. So if you load up a different, so we see that this is output 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say if I go to a different kit here, so let's say we just come over here to like a beat agent kit. So we can see that as we go through different like beat agent kits that we could lock the particular drum. So once it's set up once, you could load up other kits and not have to do all the rerouting. So if you do it once, just click on the lock and choose the lock outputs right there. All right, Runa Waira asks, hi, when we detect a tempo and we know it is a completely steady tempo, is there a way to set it right without the subtle changes? So again, most stuff that, if you know it's perfectly right, what you could do is, let's say we go back, I think I left that project open just in case. All right, so let's say we come to our tempo. All right, so a lot of stuff that's, even if it's programmed and you program it with, like maybe the guitarist isn't perfectly on time or whatever, even drum machines, if you do analysis of drum machines and you're like, oh, it's, this is perfectly steady at 100 beats a minute, like a lot of drum machines aren't steady. So if we have, let's say we have this tempo of this song here, so let's say as we kind of play, and now if I want this to, instead of, so you can see like anytime there's like the little snare fill coming up here, and there's probably going to be another fill here. So you can hear how the band kind of just drummer sped up just a little bit. So if we want this to be, even if it is fluctuating and now we want it to be perfectly steady, all you have to do at this point is select a file, go to your audio menu, and let's go to advanced, and you'll see set definition from tempo. And what we could do is we could save all of these tempo changes that are occurring on every beat. We could put that as metadata in the file. So now that I do that, and we can say, okay, we look at our tempo, it's going between 117, 123, 124. So let's say if we were to guess kind of like a median tempo, we may say 120 beats a minute. So I'm going to turn off my tempo. Now it's playing back a perfectly steady. Or if I say 136, now it's playing back perfectly steady. Or let's say 112. So now it's perfectly steady. But every single beat will be stretched slightly so it's playing back a perfect time. And I remember it's kind of one famous artist, I won't say the name, was very adamant that the drum machine they used on a huge hit from like 1981 was perfect in time. And when we did the analysis, and I did it in front of him, he was really shocked to learn that it wasn't perfectly in time, that the drum machine was drifting. So slightly, it sounds perfect, but in the eyes of the computer, when you could go down to 192,000th of a second, you could actually determine that a lot of drum machines and a lot of tracks that feel steady aren't. But again, to regulate the tempo, just come over, audio, advanced, set definition from tempo, and then whatever tempo you have, it will automatically follow. All right, so we have a question from Alex. In chord pads, is there a shortcut for moving the chord up or down an octave? All right, let me go back. Okay. Okay, so I think if we so you could come over here and, you know, once we, so I just transposed it using the different voicings. So again, if you just kind of transpose up, so that note but you could also, I think, come over to like the chord settings and adjust. Let me just see if we, I think we could set kind of, if we come here, you could choose just to have like custom chords as well. You say the lowest note is this in the chord. So let's say if I come here to my D minor chord, I could say the lowest note is going to be, let's say D2. So you could adjust kind of, okay, I only want, we don't want the root note to be added. So there are like different chord voicing styles, but there isn't necessarily like, you know, once we, if I select a chord and drag it, we could obviously at that point transpose that up by an octave, you know, like as it's played. So if we come here, so once it's in the domain, but you know, you can set your different chord voicing. So if you come over here, you could say, okay, I want for guitar voicings, piano voicings, we could, you know, choose where you want more jazz, more sophisticated articulations, or if you want to have custom articulations as well. But generally it kind of is intended to kind of give you the chord, and then you could adjust the voicing right there as opposed to, you know, or drag and drop it into the project and transpose. All right, so we see from 54 Beatmaker says, can you please pass this feature request of adding auto route to Groove Agent, be a game changer? So yeah, I'll add it. All right, wonderful to see Daniela's Da Vinci Girl in live stream. All right, so we see Jack Seed said the frequency cut 96 did the trick. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. So, all right, we have Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from across the river for me. He's number 52 on the lake from Capitol Heights, Maryland. Thanks for joining us today. All right, let's check another question. mailed in. All right, so you see, hi Greg, I'm running Cubase 15021 since introduction of folder and group channels 1502. The visibility agents and now the visibility logic in general seem not to work as intended. Here's a summary. All right, so let me just open up our folders with group channels so we can see it. Okay, so it says 1, folders with group channels stay visible despite being empty or without tracks, no parts events within the folder, and selecting show tracks with data between left and right locators between. Okay, so let's see. Okay, you said group channels stay visible despite being empty with or without tracks with no parts events within the folder. We're selecting. All right, so let me just come over here. I'm going to, let's say I remove all of those tracks there. So let's come to my channel visibility settings here. All right, so all of the tracks within the folder that had no data are hidden. But when we do that, so I went to the right, let me just try to see if so I have one part here, and I'll run the show tracks between the locators. Okay, so the folder is still present because it's a group channel as well. So let's see if I add a group channel. And we run the same visibility configuration. So let's say, okay, we'll do this. So I think our group 2, that disappears. Yeah, so I can see where that's different, but it has hidden all of the tracks within the group folder. So if we undo, let's say we come over here. Let me just revert this project here quickly. Okay, so we come to multi-drum here. Let's add another group track below it. Okay, so let's say we have group 2 here, and let's say that these are all hidden. There's no data in the folder with group track, and let's go to my configuration here. So the folder track is still visible. So okay, so but we see, but if show tracks with the data is selected, the above mentioned empty folders with channel is hidden. All right, so let's go ahead and all right, so let's make a new folder. the group track here, and let's say we erase these parts, it's empty, and we'll take a look at okay, so we see that is kind of a little inconsistent, so I'll pass that along. All right. All right, so we see just further with this, as I and some other users reported Steinberg, but I thought I'd bring it to your attention. So I'll make sure to kind of pass that along. There's kind of a inconsistency with behavior with that. All right, let's jump back to live questions. All right, we see Peter joining from Montreal. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl says, I did ask support for more Cubase versions to buy, but it's not possible. So let me know if you're trying to buy, not sure if you're trying to buy like an older version of Cubase. So generally it's only the current version, and if you have Cubase 15, that would run back to version 12. If you have, if you update it from Cubase 9 to 15, that would give you up to version 11 and primarily this is because of the transition from eLicenser to the Steinberg licensing system. So if you have 11 and earlier, we're on eLicenser. 15 through versions 12 through 15 are on the Steinberg licensing. So you could go back from 15 to 12 or 11 to version 1 with the same license. And when you update it from, let's say, version 9 or 10 to version 12, so from the eLicenser to the Steinberg licensing, it updated your eLicenser to the last version of the eLicenser support on. So if you had version 9 and updated to version 15, your version 9 license would turn into an 11 license, but that may not work since the eLicenser was shut down. But generally, I think most software companies only sell the latest versions. I probably couldn't buy Windows 10 or Windows 7 now with Windows 11, or go back to Mac OS Catalina, stuff like that. All right, so we see Uno Memento says, hey, I forgot a bit, but when do we not have streams? So it'll be May 15th. We won't, so a week from this Friday, we won't be having a live stream. All right. All right, great to see Beverly Beatty on. Don't know if I mentioned that. All right. All right, we'll see if we have more questions coming in. Let me see if I could just do a quick search, see if there's anything on Groove Agent with rippling the outputs. All right, right, just taking a quick look through the manual here, see if there's any. All right, see if we have more questions come in. All right. See, Beverly Beatty was late because she was doing dog walking with a family member. So, and she's giving a big woof to Stella. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, it says it has to be compatible with my old hardware, and 9 in my case is most stable for MacBook 2015 because I have an external disk. If all this ends, I can switch easy to Linux. Problem is, yeah, so I mean, I think it's going to be hard to, you know, most companies won't make software that's going to work, you know, contemporary versions are going to work with a 2015 MacBook. All right, so we have a question from Uno Memento. Says, can Cubase's own spectral layers do anything other than separate vocal parts? So when you know, so if you're doing unmixing, as far as unmixing, the only unmixing instrument that it's going to do is going to be for vocals, but it's going to be also be just a spectral editor as well. So let's say if I come over here, what we could do is just come over. So let's go to our extension. So I'm going to select the track or the event, and we'll go to our extension. So let's go to Spectral Layers. So, you know, if you have, like, let's say a guitar squeak or something like that. So let's say, you know, or if you wanted to, let's say there's a squeak right here, you know, you could do spectral editing just on like those particular frequency ranges. So for unmixing capabilities, it's only going to be, so we'll hear. So you're able to kind of do, you know, typical spectral editing. And again, if you're not familiar, so let's say if we grab, you know, our waveform here. So in essence, kind of almost what we're doing is we're seeing kind of the frequency response from lows, low mids, mid-range, high frequencies. So if you had, you know, some track that you needed to take out, you know, someone kicked a microphone stand with their foot during a recording, you could just kind of come in and be able to, you know, with just spectral editing. And spectral editing, so generally when we edit, you know, an audio file, we edit all of the frequencies, and most of us are kind of used to this paradigm, but spectral editing will allow us to do editing just on specific frequencies within an audio file. So Spectral Layers Go is going to allow you to do that as well. But for the unmixing, the only unmixing instrument that's going to be included is going to be the vocals. So just see from DaVinci Girl, just says Apple takes out take the Rosalina out of their new system, maybe Rosetta. So I think Rosetta is still working on current operating systems, but maybe the next one it's not. So maybe if you met Rosetta, maybe it was kind of an autocorrect. All right, so we see HS products are Groove Agent 6 and Cubase 15 Pro fully compatible with Ventura. Since I can't update my OS, I need to know if they run stabling in Ventura, or should I stick with Cubase 14 to avoid performance issues? Let me just check. I just have a hard time keeping track of Mac OS names. Yeah, let me just see. Okay, so generally what happens is they, when they recommend this, I'm sure that there's probably people that are running 15 on Ventura. Sometimes what they do, because you realize that there's probably like 8 or 9 different variants of each of the operating systems, so they may not go back and do all the quality assurance on kind of legacy operating systems as much. You could try the trial version. Let me just see. Yeah, so it may not go through all of the typical quality assurance tests on, on Mac OS, on OS Ventura, but it would probably work. I would always suggest, again, downloading the trial version and seeing how it works on your system. So you have a 60-day trial, so you could do a 60-day trial and see how it works on the system before purchasing. But again, a lot of times, like one OS back will still work, but Steinberg may not go through all of the typical testing cycles for a particular OS. Like, we're probably not going to go through and test in Windows 7, as an operating system, but they'll still probably test in Windows 10 and Windows 11, for instance. So, download the trial version and see how it works on your system. All right. All right, Gareth is just saying remember to de-squeak the like. And we see Tim K just says, I like guitar squeaks. I squeak on purpose. All right, so we see a question from Alex. Is Wavelab an important add-on for vocals, and is there a way to create presets I can apply to each recording, or can I simply do this in Cubase 15 Pro? So there's obviously, we could think of Wavelab as a really incredible audio editor. So people would use it for just raw audio editing. A lot of people associate Wavelab with mastering because generally mastering software doesn't really conform to paradigms of a recording studio. So, mastering software isn't trying to look like a large format console. It's not going to have the routing of a console. So you can do, so if you're doing stuff, mastering is a phenomenal thing in Wavelab. If you're doing podcasts radio stations, commercials, like radio station edits. Wavelab is a perfect tool for that. I think if you wanted to, work with vocals, I would probably utilize Cubase for that, and there's lots of presets that you could start off with. So let's say if I wanted to come over and let's say you'll get lots of presets, like track presets. So let's say if I just wanted to come over here, let's get to presets, track presets, audio, and then you could say, okay, I'm just going to, like vocals. So like even if you just kind of come over here, just search for vocals. All right, so let's say, okay, while you're playing, you could actually just kind of drag these over, and sometimes you don't have to worry about, like if it's, for male or female.
7th grade in the school parking lot on our yellow coach. Do you recall the day we first met?
So you could just drag these over, and as you do this, this will drag over lots of different plugins. So as I just kind of come over here.
That was a long, long time ago.
So now
it was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to.
And if you, find yourself,
well,
it's like,
now I'm so in love with you.
You say, okay, I really like this particular effects chain on it. So say, okay, I want to come over here. I want this as my.
Just like a long, long time ago.
And you come up with like the magic combination of plugins and EQ and channel strip. All you have to do is right click and just choose to save a track preset. And we'll call this Alex May 5th. And now when you come over here, you could just go to your user presets, the track presets, audio, and you could just say, oh, yeah, you just come over here. Here's our May 6, 2026, and you could just, drag over any of your, so like this is what I use for voiceovers for some Yamaha videos, and I could just come over there and save presets. So like as you go through a project, it's always a great idea just to, and you really liked how, and you're like, okay, I potentially could be working with this bass player, this drummer, this vocalist over and over again. At that point, I would, for every project, just start building a catalog of track effect presets, so that you could just instantly recall. So like when I did some voiceovers for some of the Yamaha product videos, and instead of having to come up with the right EQ curve and everything every single time, I just saved it as a track preset, and I could just drag and drop it over. So every time we needed to do one with this microphone and my voice, I could just drag that over, and I was in great shape. So, Cubase has a lot of great tools for saving your presets. So take advantage and use those. All right. So we have a question. Can Spectral Layers 12 be used to remove hi-hat bleed from a snare track? Can you show an example? Let's take a look. So. just all right, let me just probably do it in our project here real quick. Hang on. Just all right, so all right, so let's say if I come over here, let's listen to our snare top. All right, so let's come over. Hang on a second real quick. Just have to check something. Hang on, I'll be back in just 1 minute. All right, sorry about that. All right, so let's say if we want to come to our snare track and get rid of the bleed. All right, so let's listen to our snare. All right, so our snare is picking up the bleed. All right. So let's all right, so say we're so I think that there is a way. Let me just see if I could remember how to do this. Or if we come over to, or let's say our hi-hat here. All right, so let's see. All right, so I think that we could, I haven't done this in forever long time, but that we could use like one track to get rid of, as the basis, to get rid of another track. let's try debleed. All right, so let's get to my snare track here. Okay. And let's try the debleed and say we want from the hi-hat. And let's say I want to remove the kick as well. Let's say from our snare. All right, so now where we had a lot of kick, so now our snare comes in. And before, if we did that, how we were. So just come over to like your snare track and say we have our snare bottom track here. Go into Spectral Layers. And under the modules, debleed. And then you could say, okay, I want the kick and hi-hat to be debled from this snare track. So now when you go to listen to it, so give that a try. It works pretty well. All right, so we see from Da Vinci Girl says, yes, I could try this, or Wilfried could try. Why I can buy not the same version with the same email on my account. This is also handicapped to buy. So you get 3 licenses per account. So I'm not sure if you need, if you just create, if you need it, another license, you could just simply utilize another email address. If it is like for an educational facility, sometimes where we have an IT person that's managing like an educational lab, sometimes they could assign multiple licenses in a lab environment, but I'm not sure if that's going to be applicable for you, Daniela, with that. But you could have 3 different licenses on a single account or a single email address. All right, so we see just comment from Tim K to Uno Memento says, don't always change strings on a user guitar. Old strings were better metal, and I'm too broke to replace strings. That ain't. So yeah, I can relate. All right. All right, so we see from Beverly Beatty says, Greg, if I duck sidechain a bass track, say techno style against a kick drum, it sounds cool as it has a pumping sound effect due to the kick drum. However, in a certain segment of time or measure, if the kick drum is not present, then how does one keep the pumping sound with no kick present? So there's a couple different approaches to this. So let's say, jump back to right, so if you always want that, but not necessarily to be kind of sidechain driven. All right, so let's say I have my synth sound here. All right, let me just. All right, so I'll first set it up with the sidechain. Okay, so let's say I have these two sources. All right, and I wanted to sidechain a compressor from, like, let's say this kick track. So again, to do the initial sidechain, we could come over and just say, okay, I want this to sidechain from the kick. Okay, so let's say, so we could add a sidechain source. All right, we'll turn the sidechain on. Okay, so let's say if we just. So if you want that kind of pumping sound without a sidechain, there's a couple different approaches. One is probably just to use, let's say if I just put a volume plugin on it here. So let's just come over to tools, to volume. All right. We could go to a modulator and say, okay, I just want to put, let's say a shaper, and I want this shaper to control this volume, and I want this to be like every measure. So now when we play this, I'll play it without the kick, and we'll. So let's say I want every beat. Or every half note. And you could even kind of draw in your own. So let's say if you want to come here, and we'll bring this down. And so we can make that faster if you want, or longer. So every 2 bars, every 1 bar. So that could be an approach. There's also a plugin called FX Modulator, which can do kind of similar things. That we go under modulation. Let's see if my mouse is going to cooperate here. I have to plug my mouse in. Bear with me just for a second. All right. All right, so let's take a look at another insert plugin. So, and this will be found, sorry, my mouse battery died, under FX Modulator. And here we could just choose to go with, should have a volume control. We have volume. And so we could do kind of very similar thing here. So let's say, okay, I want this to And if we wanted to just double click to add different nodes, I could come here. It's okay, let's take that node here. So then you have different banks of presets too. So if you wanted to play around with different ones. So that's another option, is using kind of the FX modulator. So let's say you want to do like here's an 8-bar riser. So that's combining not only volume but pitch shift, so you can come and do all sorts of creative stuff. So if you want to come over here, so filters, bit crushers, overdrives, volume, and for each different effect we can come over here and choose different envelopes for different effects and combine them together. All right, so we see from Baba Saw, says, hi Greg, Cubase Pro 15 on Mac Sequoia. Is there a way to increase the jog speed? So I think we covered that earlier in the live stream. It was like the first question. But I don't know of a way to have the default one. But again, what we showed was if you wanted to do like your jog wheel is just to come over to your key commands, and you'll see under transport shuttle play. So you could use a key command to change it to a different speed right there. All right, we see from Jay the Jolly, who asks, says, someone asked me to go here and ask, Roland JV1080 receives MIDI from my MIDI controller in Cubase Elements 15, but I cannot get sound at all. All right, so realize that when you're dealing with external instruments, you know, Cubase will send the MIDI out to your JV1080, and the JV1080 is generating the sounds. So with your JV1080 and Cubase Elements, the sound is outside of Cubase. So if you're sending MIDI to your JV1080 and you connect a headphone to the 1080, I have one sitting in my rack, it's a great module. But once you connect that headphone to it, you should hear sound coming out of the headphone output on the JV1080 on the front panel. So Cubase isn't generating the sound. The audio is going to be coming out of the headphone output or out of the audio outputs from the audio interface or from the JV1080. So, and that's why they're often called tone generators. So if you want to hear that, you would combine it with the audio from Cubase in a mixer. But the sound isn't coming from your audio interface. The sound is coming from the JV1080 itself. So let me know if you connect headphones directly to the 1080, if you're hearing the MIDI information go out to it, but the sound itself is not going to be coming back into Cubase. If you have Cubase Pro, you could connect it as an external instrument. So if you go to your audio connections, you have external instruments, and basically you would take the audio outputs out of the back, the analog outputs, connect it into an audio interface, and then basically when the audio is generated, it can be routed back into Cubase. So if you don't have external effects, you could take the audio outs from the JV1080, feed it into audio inputs, add a stereo audio track tell it what stereo inputs that you want it to be coming in from. So you can say, okay, I want it coming in from, let's say, stereo 3 and 4. That's where it's connected. And then you could just place that track and monitor that particular track. So when you come over here, you can say, okay, we just added our audio track, and once we have our audio track, all we have to do is to monitor the track. So you could do that, but again, the sound is being generated by the 1080. It's not going into Cubase. You have to, take it into a mixer or connect it to your audio interface and place a channel into monitor to hear it within your Cubase setup. Okay. And welcome to the live stream, Jay the Jolly. Thanks for joining us. Okay. See, Beverly Beatty just says there's so much in Cubase, truly incredible. Greg has shown some stuff I didn't even know existed in Cubase 15 Pro. I have often the basic setup, but there's so much fun under the hood. All right, so we see Soren just says, I had a question about getting tempo detected song on the beat. I just had to move the audio, easy to do. So yeah, if you did a tempo, detection of a particular song, so let's say if you're here, once you've done the tempo detection, so if you do the tempo detection, it'll move the beat to the audio, but if you kind of know what the tempo is, you could just move the event here to snap it to the grid. And that's assuming that you have snap turned on. If it's kind of not snapping at all, just hit the J key, and you can see up here that snap could be turned on or off right there. Okay, Jay the Jolly says, I'm using a USB MIDI keyboard, but actual 5-pin MIDI cable from my Focusrite 1818 to my JV 1080 hardware. MIDI message light blinks, but no sound from the soundtrack is my problem. So again, let us know, Jay, how the audio of your JV 1080 is, where it's going to. So again, the sound is being sent to your JV 1080. And we need to have that sound sent back to Cubase somehow if you're expecting to hear it, or if it's going into a mixer of some kind. So Jazz Dude makes a very great comment. It says, what we see in Club Cubase Hangouts here is only the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says, Greg, can you suggest a hamburger? They should start really sophisticated tutorials about each of the modulators, I mean at least 30 minutes per modulator with downloadable templates, examples. I'll pass it on. Again, it's always a matter of resources, but I'll see if I could help with that. Jazz Dude says about 90% of Cubasers know less than 10% of the options given modern production sounds. All right, so we have Roland Stuff joining from Sussex, England. Thanks for joining today. Okay, so we see from Jay the Jolly says, I've created an audio channel linking to the stereo channel the JV is connected to, but no sound. So make sure you're not going to hear sound on the audio track. So let's say if we come over here, we would say, okay, we're going to add an audio track. So we would say JV 1080 audio. Okay, so once you're in the track, you need to make sure that you have the monitor enabled. So this is like the little speaker icon. So make sure that you have the speaker icon. Also let us know like what audio interface you have it connected to, and make sure that you have the correct connections like for the routing configured here. And if it probably wouldn't matter, but depending on the audio interface, you may want to just come over here and just say, okay, I want the audio system here to go directly, directly out here. So you could come over and just see if you have direct monitoring turned off. That could be something else. Let me just switch my audio interface here in Cubase. But once you probably won't hear anything until the monitor button is turned on. So. All right, we see Jaxie just sharing another trick on the sidechaining to Beverly that I'll show as well. So if you didn't want to hear the kick drum itself, let's say on our sidechaining scenario here, let me just revert this. Okay, so we'll come over here. Let's say we have our side chain. Okay, so let's say, all right, so we'll set up our side chain again. All right, so I'm going to select the track. We'll come into, let's say, the compressor here. Let's just set our side chain source to our kick. All right. So if we have this going on, so if I still want that kick to do the side chaining, but I don't want to hear the kick, and I still kind of want that pumping sound, what I could do is select this track, and on the output in the routing area, I'm just going to send it to no bus. So you can kind of get the effect of the sidechaining without having to have the sidechaining input source audible. Just by taking the source and routing it from like a stereo out to no bus. And that way it's not going anywhere and you won't hear the source, but you'll just hear the effect of its pumping on the sidechain source. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly says, I managed to get a small visual in the meter and the sound channel, but even with the 30 dB gain effect, it does not seem to play louder than -59. I want to use Cubase, but FL Studio is the only DAW my JV works in. So let me know like what audio interface you're connecting it to, and make sure that your MIDI volume is set to 127. Make sure that the output on your JV 1080. But if you're so let us know what audio interface you're going into as well. If you're going line level, if you're plugging into a mic pre or not. So if you could let us know the audio interface, that would be helpful. All right, so you see DaVinci Girl says thank you for your suggestion. I personally dislike such big changes Cubase do them very fast in general. In case of a new Cubase change, the learning curve is too much for me to start close from the beginning. Right. So, I think we're always going to be, incorporating more user-requested features into Cubase and kind of setting the definition of the workflow. And licensing changes have been, very good for business and allows us to kind of do electronic, delivery and distribution of our product instead of shipping physical e-licensors around the world. So I think most people appreciate the Steinberg licensing system. All right, Tim Weinheimer says, lots of questions I had other people asked. Thanks. So. Okay. All right, so we see Jay the Jolly says, Dad, I tried many DAWs trying to leave FL. None wanted to work with the 1080 Live Reaper Cubase, but I felt Cubase, I can somehow get it to work. That would be a dream. So yeah, I use my 1080 with Cubase whenever I'm using external stuff, so definitely works. But again, if you could let us know exactly what audio interface you're using, and if you're going headphone out, you're going the out. Let me see. So you're going into inputs 5 and 6. Yeah, but let us know what audio. Let us know if you get a different level if you go into other inputs as well. All right, so we have Rick saying, Bratman Studio, just want to say hi. He's getting ready for vacation running around. We hope you have a wonderful vacation. Let us know where you're going to. We'll all travel vicariously through you. Jazz Dude just commenting. He says, just imagine a chain of 4 MIDI insert plugins. Each influences the next one. So, and then you can add MIDI sends to MIDI tracks. So, all right, we'll see if we get some more questions coming in. But yeah, Jay the Jolly, if you could let us know what audio interface you're using and what cables, all that good stuff. Just see a created MIDI track sending from my piano to my interface, which makes the JV react. So let me know also if you're just hearing audio, like if you connect headphones to the JV 1080, if that is sounding as expected to you, so we could see if it's a problem on incoming MIDI data or if it's the audio output of the 1080, we could isolate it with that. Okay, so we see Jay the Jolly is running a Focusrite 3rd generation Scarlett 18, maybe I see 188, maybe an 18i8, 5-pin MIDI, and 2 times jack cables. This is absolutely falling for Cubase. Let me know if you connect, again, connect headphones to, if you have headphones, connect that to the JV 1080 and see if the volume is, if the JV 1080 is outputting a good volume level from there. All right, I think we got through all of our mailed in questions. Let me just all right, yeah, we've gone through all of our mailed in questions. All right, we'll see if all right, so we see Bratman Studios going across country to Tennessee for a wedding, and then on to Orlando to Universal and Disney. Catch up with some of his former work friends at Universal. Sounds like a great trip. All right, so we have John checking in. All right, so we see volume is better in the headphones. Yeah, it says perhaps I need a single to double jack to connect from there. 30 dB gain effect works for now, though. Thanks a bunch, man. So make sure, like, in like if you have like a mixer applet for the, check to make sure if you have a mixer applet for your something, for your Focusrite interface. There's usually like a mixer of some kind, so it may kind of look just come over. So maybe it's just like the level in your so like when you come over here to your software mixer, just check to make sure, like, inputs 5 and 6, like the volume isn't all the way down in your Focusrite. So often you have kind of a bit of a software mixer, so maybe those volume levels are dropped in the software mixer, and that's kind of attenuating or trimming the input gain that's going directly, on those inputs. And you can see if you plug it into inputs 1 and 2, if you get a different gain level. So if you have good headphone level out, it's probably going to be in the Focusrite mixer software. So I would check that. All right, so we see it says wondering why nearly all Cubase users are Mac users too. I think we're probably the most evenly split DAW on the market. So obviously I run Cubase on Mac for the live streams, but I also run Cubase for my personal studio. I run it on Windows, so I think you'll see a good amount of Windows and Mac users here. So there's a lot of people have switched from other programs that were on Mac before, and because they get better performance with their Cubase on the Mac compared to other programs, because we take advantage of all the different processing cores, especially with Apple Silicon processors. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly says, I'll mess with the Focusrite controller app. I see I'll see how much more I can improve it. I'm just extremely happy to have audio now. My teacher back in the day swore by Cubase. I'm realizing why. So it's great. Let us know who your teacher was and where you're from. Always great to know. All right, let's see if we get some more questions in. You guys are all learning your Cubase so well. You're going to put me out of a job. I have to come out with a new version, so keep me employed. All right, we'll give it another minute or two, see if we have more questions sneaking in. Okay, so we see Jay the Jolly is from Denmark. Years ago, some schools were musicians. They all swore by Cubase. I'll show you a good thing if you're a JV 1080 user. So let's say if you have your JV 1080, if we come over here, let's get to your studio. So let's go to your MIDI device manager in your studio menu. All right, so let's say we come over here, we could install a device. So let's say we want to install JV 1080. Okay, so we'll come over here. So we'll have our JV 1080. You'll say it's connected to your Focusrite interface for your MIDI port. Okay, so now when you come over to your 1080, you could just now come over here. Let's say we add a MIDI track. We will say, okay, I want this to be on channel 1. You can say the output routing, and we see your MIDI devices. So we'll say our JV 1080. Okay, we're going to add our track. So now once you do that, you could arm that audio track and keep those tied together. But if you click here, now all of your preset patch names for your JV 1080 are available right here. So that way you could just select by patch name and have access to all of your different settings for you. So if you haven't done that, if you haven't set that up, you'll love it and be able to I always had all of my patch names for all my MIDI devices set up in my studio. So once I turn the rack on, I never really look at my rack of all my tone modules. I could access everything from Cubase and save it within the particular project. Okay. I see Jay the Jolly just says, as an adult, I'm now getting into Cubase as well. So that's great. And we hope to see you on many more live streams. Again, we do these on Tuesdays and Fridays, just about every week. All right, so we see from Alex says, no way, Greg, I think your job is secure for some time to come. Hopefully. I like doing it, so. See, Tim K says, the only Apple thing he owns is a 30 gigabyte video iPod from 2002. Won it in a contest. Still works. That's good. Okay, question from George Conte. When I recorded my Roland electronic drum kit into Cubase via USB, all the MIDI notes are combined into one track. How can I record them to individual drum tracks or separate them after the fact? Okay. So let's say I have, so it's easy to separate after the fact. So let's say if I come over here, we have a pattern in Groove Agent. Let me just, thought I had a pattern. Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's say I have a drum pattern here in my acoustic agent. And let's say, okay, well. All right, so let's say kind of a simple pattern, but just for demonstration's sake, what you could do is select the event on the project window. We want to come over to MIDI, and we'll see dissolve part. So here we want to choose to separate pitches, and we could optimize display if you want, but when I do this, now the kick, the snare, all the individual sounds will be on their own separate track. So once again, just come over, select the events here. So let's say we have it in our drum editor view. All right, so now what we can do is, again, go to MIDI, dissolve part, and choose to separate pitches. And now each of those will automatically be put onto their own track. Okay, so we have from T Bishop 2, is there an easier way to loop through a section rather than using the start and end points? All right, so let's say if I wanted to loop through a portion here, let me just... Okay, so let's say I just want to take this acoustic guitar part here. One way to do it, there's a preference. So if you're on Windows, go to Edit menu to Preferences. Mac OS, go to your Cubase menu to Settings. And then I think it might be under Transport. Let's see. Or maybe editing. Let's try project, mix console. But we could do, I kind of used a range tool. Okay, cycle. So if you go to the preferences or settings, go to editing, you can say cycle follows range selection. So let's say I'm playing like this guitar part. If I have my range tool, I could just come right over here. Or I could just select a range and that range will loop. Now let's say if I split this event here. So let's say this is a separate event here. One of the things that I could do, so let's say if I have like just a small section, like an event here, like, okay, I select this, then you could also hit Alt or Option plus P, and that would just play that particular selection. So again, now if you wanted to solo, you could hit Alt or Option plus Shift plus P, and that would solo and loop this selection. So if I just come here and hit Alt P, not Control or Command P, Alt P, you could just loop the selection kind of like just that easily. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, or if I'm misunderstanding. I'd be glad to help. Okay, so we see from Jay the Jolly, he says, also I'm not much of an Apple guy, but when Windows 11 was just getting too poor of a system to make music on, hence why I'm considering separating music from my gaming machine and getting a Mac for music. So, I think, either, as someone that's grown up, I've been doing kind of digital audio on computers for 34 years or so. I think both, and seeing just, a lot of different varying operating systems over the years. I think both of the systems, are working great. It could be, I personally, like my PC, I just use kind of for dedicated studio tasks. So I don't do gaming on it. I'm not a gaming person. My son's kind of into it. But so I don't have any tweaks done for gaming that could have adverse effects on my DAW, but I think either operating system works great. So, and I think if you want backward compatibility, that Windows is going to be kind of far better than Mac OS for that. So there's a lot of like cutoffs with Mac OS where if they killed the DVD drives, they killed FireWire, they killed Thunderbolt 2. So there's all sorts of kind of obsolescence that could be more prevalent on Mac OS as well. So as I often say, both operating systems are phenomenal and they both suck, just in different ways. So we see Jazzy just uses a light Windows 11 version. All right. So we see from T Bishop 2 says, that's it. Thanks. And Jazzy is just kind of sharing about Windows latency mon. And I think Windows 11 just did kind of in their one of the last 2 or 3 updates, they just kind of redid kind of the MIDI layer for Windows for like MIDI 2.0. And I had for a while, I had like 2 of the MIDX USB interfaces and they weren't working on Windows 11. And I was just about, and I have 2 of them, so I have 16 in, 16 MIDI out, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna have to break down and buy another MIDI interface after 25 years. And with the latest Windows update, the MIDX drivers just magically showed up and started working and been flawless ever since. So kudos to Microsoft for making my old hardware still compatible with the latest operating systems in an update. So, all right. See if we have more questions coming in. I'll give it another minute or so. Jazzy is just recommending the latency mon if you have pops and clicks. See, Jack Seed says, still crossing my fingers, Steinberg will eventually make Cubase available for Linux. Mint is getting pretty nice. Okay, so we see it from Beverly Beatty. It says, Greg, I'm about to change some files around on Windows. I need to stuff files, them into a unique folder to find them quickly, such as kicks, drums, snares, etc. As I have a dog's breakfast of sound files all over the place. So we're moving them around. What do I need to refresh? So just make sure that, file management is always going to be important when you're dealing with lots of files. And if you ask composers, like one of the most important skills, like non-musical skills that someone could have as a composer or just doing production on your computer, it's often going to be file management. It's something that's not sexy, it's not fun, it's not exciting. But if you can't find your project for a client, you can't find the project you just worked on, that's always a bummer. So, try to keep, I will try to keep all of, as long as you can access the sounds and you know where they're at, it's always good to have them organized. So if you have, a whole folder of kicks and subfolders of kicks, you could do that, and then just come over to your media bay here. And once you're in your file browser, because like you may be, say, okay, when I come over here, you could right click and say add to favorite. So I made a folder of like a favorites folder. So you could just come right over here. And like I just have one for one shots. So if I'm looking for snares, I can just come right over here and find, different kicks, snares, and say, okay, this is the sample I'm looking for. So, to me, as long as, if you kind of keep it in the same spot, just go to the file browser here in Media Bay, because it doesn't really matter where it is as long as you kind of can access it. But just come over here, and wherever your folder, your samples are, just right click and add a favorite, give it a name, and then you could just jump right to that folder. So, because when you want to find a kick drum, you don't want to lose the inspiration because you're looking through different file folders. But a way to kind of, if you're not so great with file management, save presets, add favorites, so that you could jump and navigate to them quickly. All right. See Sables on Winters. Yeah, so we see just another comment from Beverly. It says, in Cubase, after moving them to unique folders, so how could they be found again? Just make sure, like, when you go to your media menu here, and you go to your media bay, that the new folder, so you could just come over here to your computer, and just say, okay, it's going to be on this particular folder. Make sure that, so say, okay, I'm in my users account, and let's say my admin account, and it's my documents folder, and I want this particular folder to be found. So just come here in your like large media bay and make sure that you just have like a check directly to that particular folder that you want to see. So if you put a check here and say, okay, now I want to rescan, and you could just rescan that particular folder. So just make sure that when you do this, that your folder is checked, and then Cubase will look into that folder to access all of your media files for you. Okay. All right, so you see Jay the Jolly says, I hear Cubase will work on Windows and probably Mac too, with devices like the Chord Nano Control 2, which is, to me, a nice, affordable way to get into some extra tactile feedback. So yeah, the Nano Control 2 works great. It's probably one of my favorite controllers because it's so small and accessible. You don't have to buy extra furniture for it, but when you come over here to your MIDI remote, you can just, your Chord Nano Control is automatically recognized. So, and it comes with different presets, so you could get to work right away and kind of program different functions, use quick controls. So right out of the box, when you connect your Nano control, it's going to automatically, be available and pop up. And, Nano controls, like I've had many controllers, and the Nano control is like just always stays on my desk, and it's not in the way. And when I need to grab stuff to do work, it's always there and available. All right, so we see, are you using the new Yamaha CC1 USB controller, and are there some cool uses we might not know about? I in my personal studio, I have one. I like kind of the combination of Stream Deck. I think that I don't think there's any like huge like Easter egg type features. I think the fader feels great on it. Being able to kind of program the Stream Deck controls is always wonderful. It's a good size. It's not too big. So I'm probably going to have to send mine back to Yamaha, I think. So I don't have it on my desk currently, but I did get a loaner, but I don't know, like kind of hidden features kind of come to mind with it, but I think it's a great controller and a great way to kind of move forward. All right, so we see from Sable Winters, Greg, what is the best method to removing artifacts on stems from spectral layers? So, sometimes, there isn't, like you could go through, if there's other tracks that are there, sometimes doing the process twice, I've seen on like a stem extraction could, make it a little more focused. But and sometimes just going in and manually editing out some different things. There are different quality levels. So if you do have kind of a full mix, like the higher quality levels maybe, take longer to do, but they will yield higher quality resorts. So let's say if I come over here to Spectral Layers, I won't go through the whole process for time's sake, but let's say if we come over here to modules and we unmix the song, there is kind of a quality. So, you could have it done faster. It's kind of a good, better, best. I would always go with the high algorithm. It may take a little while, but I think the quality is definitely worth it. And then once you select a layer after it's been unmixed, then you could further tweak, particular settings in Spectral Layers and do some spectral editing as needed. All right. So we see John Costigan says, "Hi Greg, I'm using a sketch demo and imported the string tracks to a new project as I tried to replace the existing MIDI with a new tune. I've made the 7 articulations disappear. User error." So if it's Iconica Sketch, if we have, let's say if I come here, we have this cello part in Iconica Sketch here. All right, so let's say if we now solo this. And I go to my articulations. Okay, so let's say imported the song, the string tracks. All right, so I know, let's see if I import, let me just put in some other articulations here. So we have some changes. Okay, so let me save this as a different song. Okay, I'm going to do a new project. And I'm going to import the tracks from that project. Okay, so let's choose our cello part and see if those articulations carried over. Let me not kill the part here, sorry. So it looks like when we're here, all of the articulations I just drew in were carried over. So I'm not sure if you're importing the tracks or if you're just kind of, you could also, if you save it with, you could save the articulations with track preset, but the track preset won't contain the media. So make sure that you're I'm not sure if you're copying it over, but if you're importing the tracks from the project, it looks like the articulations are included with that. And that could be a Cubase 15 thing. I'm not sure if you're on 14, but let me know if you're doing that same way, John. All right, we see Gerald Ely just stopped in and hit the like button. He's going to replay it later. All right, so we see Jay the Jolly says, man, this excites me. You helped me fix the problem. The only problem I had with software today and saved my day. Millions of thanks, man. Can't wait to get deeper into Cubase now. Well, we're here on Tuesdays and Fridays. So we're always here to help you with your transition. So we hope to see you on many future live streams. And thanks for joining today. All right. So we see Peter Raymonds checking in from Winnipeg, still dealing with a few snow flurries. I saw like Colorado is getting some more snow coming up as well. All right, we see Sable Winters says she'll have to do manual cleaning of tracks. All right, let's see if there's other questions that kind of sneak in. Give it a little bit of time here. There's usually about a 20 to 30 second delay from when I talk to when you guys hear. Just sharing some links for how to about multi-button mouses and how effective they could be. Thanks for sharing the links, Jazz Dude. Right, we'll see if we have more questions. Anyone else has more questions, feel free to ask. Got through all of our mailed in questions. All right, Sable's wishing everyone a great week. Given our minute or two, if we don't have any questions, we'll wrap up a little early. And again, we'll be here on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So if you're new to Cubase, just feel free to join us and learn all sorts of great tips and tricks and learn from other people's questions. All right, Jazzy Lamel just says, hey Greg, can you go over some tips and tricks on how to use black valve? All right. Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a quick look. Let's try it on this here. All right, so just revert this. All right, so let's say we want to do it on our, maybe our drums. All right, so I'm just gonna make this into a group channel. All right, so let's open up black valve. So we're just gonna do it on our drums here. So we'll go ahead and solo our group channel. So what's kind of cool about black valve is, you can think of it as very kind of, compression. So just great compressor, but with great drive. So if we come over here, so if you want to add that extra bit of grit, so this is the thing that kind of gives it its little magic. And you have your dry wet, so if you wanted to kind of work with like a parallel type setting. So now if we listen to that in context, just kind of an extreme example there. But play with the drive, and the drive is what's going to get out. The rest of the controls are pretty standard, but the drive is what kind of makes this one, gives it the character that people love about black valve right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Jazzy Lamel, great to see you on. All right. All right, so we see Jay the Jolly says, glad I managed to hop in time to experience some of the stream. It's great to have new faces and new people joining us all the time. Okay, so you see from John Koskian says that's how he did it, Greg. I then tried to paste in new MIDI from a track and the list of articulations disappeared. So make sure, like, if you're doing that, if it's a Hallian-based instrument, so let's say if I'm over here, so let's say if I copy this, let's just add an instrument track. Let me come over here. Let me just add Hallian. Because usually when we do this, the articulations are kind of loaded at the track level. So when we come over here, we can see the expression map. And if I have kind of like a blank event here, just sneeze real quick. Yeah. And so if I have a blank part, let me just copy all the notes. So select all, copy. I'm going to come into this event and paste. All right, so now the articulations don't show up because perhaps on this new lane, the articulations haven't been loaded. So if there's no map, make sure that you have the expression map selected for where you're trying to paste, and then the articulation should be there. So when you're copying these events, if there's no expression map on the track, then they probably won't copy over, but make sure that you just come here. And if you have Hallian, you go to the expression map, you can add the expression map or just select the existing expression map there. So let me know if that helps. All right. All right. So we're seeing Jazz Dude give credit to Best Korean Jesus for he was a big proponent of using the gaming mice. All right. So we see Beverly Beatty just saying, wishing everyone a great day, and a huge thanks to me. So thank you for your kind words. Appreciate it. All right. We'll give it another couple minutes, see if more questions come in. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from people. And again, you could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, give another 10 seconds, see if there's any other questions. All right. Okay, so we see all right, so we see Peter Raymond says, I was trying to render a track BBC SO and kept getting a brief audio dropout in the same spot over and over again. Ended up exporting audio with the track in solo mode and then brought that in. One other thing that you do, just it's always a clever thing to do. So let's say if we come here, and if we have like this cello part playing, if you run into export problems, you can always just, one other trick is just to add an audio track and say the input is coming from my virtual instruments, the track instruments, and we'll say it's coming from my cello. Hit add track. And then what we want to do is just record. So let's say as we come over here. Then the audio could be just routed. The audio from the virtual instrument could just be captured right to there. So if you could do a real-time export, you could always do that as well. You could do that for multiple tracks at the same time. So however you wanted to approach it. All right. So we see from John Costigan says, you nailed it, Greg. Thanks. So you're welcome. Thanks for asking your question. It's always great to be able to. And thanks for the confirmation. All right, we see Jazz Dude sharing a link of all the 44,000 plus topics and over 2,000 hours. You could search all the Hangout questions on cubaseindex.com. All right, so I think we are out of questions. I'll give it another 10, 20 seconds, see if we get any more comments or questions. And if not, we'll wrap up a little early. Thanks to everyone for all the great questions today. I hope that everyone has learned new tips and tricks. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and let your friends know about the live stream so we could still be helping out lots of different people with their Cubase journey. All right, thank you for the kind words from Capital Razor, as well as from Peter Raymond. Thanks, Adam Langford, for your comment. All right, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. So we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We hope to see all people back and some new faces, and let your friends know what we're doing here. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Goodbye.